From Checo's horrible crash that gave it all away, to the wild conspiracy that he actually works for Mercedes, the secret to why Red Bull is so darn fast is finally exposed. And it's all because of a crash. Red Bull driver Sergio Perez made an early exit from the qualifying session in Q1 because he lost the rear of his car going into a Sandoval corner. After that, he hit the barriers and the red flag was triggered. There were 3 consequences of that. First, Perez started the race P20. Now, considering just how good the Red Bull is, he shouldn't have had too much of a problem, right? Because he could have easily overtaken a lot of folks to at least finish in the points. Well, no. The problem is that the race was in Monaco. It's a tight, bendy, and twisty circuit, and it's almost impossible to overtake on. When it comes to Monaco, the race is decided on Saturday, not Sunday. This meant that the guy lost massive amounts of points and is out of the bid for the championship since Max Verstappen is so far ahead. The second consequence of the crash was the cost. Considering that his car was destroyed, there was an extensive list of components that had to be changed. The team had to change his floor, rear wing, energy store, steering wheel, front wing, gearbox, suspension, and a couple other minor components as well. Since we're in the cost cap era, where every penny matters, this was a massive blow to the Austrian outfit. But the biggest consequence of the crash was the fact that Red Bull's floor design has been leaked. Before I get into everything, let me give y'all a quick science lesson. F1 cars are powerful, extremely powerful. Yet you don't see them flying off into the air, and neither do you see them slipping in tight corners. That's because these cars have extremely complex mechanisms that keep them glued to the ground. Before the 2022 season, the cars used downforce as a way for sticking to the track. But then the regulations changed, and now the cars have to use ground effect aerodynamics to do the same thing. In easier words, the floor of the car has to be designed in such a way that it creates a vacuum which then sucks the car towards the track. And guess what? No team figured out how to build the right car with these new regulations, except Red Bull. And since the floor is where all the magic happens, teams have been dying to figure out what Red Bull's floor looks like. But the underside of the car is an extremely difficult area for the rival teams to spy on. Cause look, the teams can study the heck out of other teams' side pods, rear wings, front wings, etc. But they can't flip their cars upside down and study it. However, once the RB19 crashed, it was lifted by a crane and everyone could see the floor. Now every single team on the grid had a glimpse of the beautiful, detailed design that was created by Adrian Newey, the best aerodynamicist in Formula One. Yet, at the same time, Red Bull team principal Christian Horner isn't at all worried about it. When he was first asked about the incident, he stated, "It's very rude to look up people's skirts, really." But then he later stated that this isn't really a big deal. Here, take a look at what he said. Pictures of floors get taken in and around the paddock. The cars arrive in vans, they work with the cars and the shutters are up. Each team employs spy photographers to get pictures of the cars when they're in pieces. And this is exactly why he thinks that this isn't the first time someone's taken a picture of the floor of his car. Like, yeah, this was the first time this car was suspended from a crane for the world to see, but chances are that teams already had way better shots of the floor. Plus, the same happened to Mercedes. The Mercedes W14 came out on track during practice with some heavy upgrades. I mean, the Silver Arrows squad finally ditched the entire minimal side pod design that had been failing since the start of the 2022 campaign. But during FP3, Lewis crashed his car, revealing the underside of the upgraded car. And folks, the difference was staggering. I mean, just take a look at this picture. The Red Bull floor is intricate, complex, and it's full of depth. The Mercedes floor, on the other hand, is just so basic. Ted Kravitz, an F1 reporter, called the Mercedes floor prehistoric, and he wasn't wrong. And while Christian Horner found the entire thing amusing, you know who didn't? Our favorite Bond villain, Toto Wolff. Mercedes team boss Toto said that he can't even comprehend how this happened. According to him, since the car was on the road, it could have been put in a truck. There was no need for the car to be lifted so high, showcasing it to the world. That was suboptimum for us, to say the least, he said. However, he doesn't really have a lot to worry about. Cause let's be real here for a second. Despite the upgrades, the W14 just isn't performing at the same level as the Red Bull. So even if other teams do try to copy a design, it's going to be Red Bulls, not Mercedes. On top of that, the new weight distribution regulations mean that not a lot can be copied. As Horner stated, folks can already kinda get their hands on pictures of the underneath of the car one way or the other. But what lifting by a crane does is that it reveals its weight distribution, because once it's lifted, the car's obviously going to lean towards the heavier side. Now, in the past, this would have been extremely helpful information. Rival teams would have been able to figure out how the top teams are making their cars and would have tried to copy them, because when the car is lifted, you can try to figure out where the center of gravity is. But with these new regulations, there's a pretty narrow window of weight distribution to be worked with anyway. But you know who feels differently about this. Aston Martin's performance director, Tom McCullough. Tom believes that the exposure of the underneath of the RB19 will provide teams with some useful information. Come on, Tom. Your team has already copied everything it could from Red Bull. You folks even stole their engine supplier. Just let him be. But no, for real, he's right too. Because you see, there's a lot that the teams can still learn. So there's a wooden plank that's mounted underneath the floor of every F1 car. It's there to prevent the cars from running too low to the ground. Now, here's the thing. This plank obviously wears out over time. And it's actually the pattern of the wear on the plank that's going to give the aerodynamicists an idea of how the RB19 really works. These folks are now going to know how the air hits the plank, where it hits it from, and how it flows out of it, and that really could be super useful for the teams. But there's an important question on everyone's mind. Is it too late to copy? So here's the problem. The floor layout really is super sophisticated. And when you add the $135 million cost cap to the equation, it'll be extremely difficult for the teams to copy. On top of that, the picture at the end of the day is a low-quality 2D photo, plus the lighting's really bad. It's not going to be something you can just replicate in a second. However, that doesn't mean that folks aren't trying. Former Mercedes driver and 2016 world champion Nico Rosberg has stated that there are teams that are trying their best to study Red Bull's floor. Talking to Sky Sports, he stated that he spoke to 2 different people from 2 different teams, and their sole focus since the Monaco Grand Prix has been to try to dissect those Red Bull pictures from Monaco. According to him, an unknown team that fans speculate is Mercedes has had quite a few people really dedicating all their time trying to analyze and understand the airflow. And that's exactly why so many folks are now linking Sergio Perez to Mercedes. Wait, what? Yep. One RB fan tweeted that Checo's colluding with Mercedes to help them copy the RB19, and that he crashed on purpose because he knew there would be cranes there to lift the car up. According to that fan, he's doing this because Toto promised him a seat at Mercedes. Yeah, no, that's a tad bit too far-fetched. On the other hand, some fans state that Red Bull gave him a horrible floor, and he crashed on purpose to put the rivals in the wrong development direction. Yeah, no, that's a bit too far-fetched too. Well, there you have it. From conspiracies that Checo actually works for Mercedes to his horrible crash that gave it all away, this was everything on Red Bull's F1 secret that's finally exposed.